Before I call the Shadow Minister, I do want to emphasise again, and I will do when he's finished, how important it is for those who have contributed to the debate to be here for the wind-ups. Shadow Minister, Dr. Alan Whitehead.
Yeah. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have had an excellent and very pointed debate this evening, and certainly from our side, honourable members combining together to point out the deficiencies in this bill, point out what a specious and potentially damaging bill it is, and indeed questioning why this bill was brought to this House in the first place, which is very much what I want to do. My honourable friend, member for Rotherham, called this bill illogical and damaging and pointed out that marine protection areas could be put at risk by the bill. My honourable friend, the honourable member for Llanelli, pointed out that this makes us look ridiculous on a world stage. My honourable friend, the member for Brent North, pointed out the bill itself was based on a series of lies and indeed quoted the UN General Secretary stating that the truly dangerous radicals are those countries that are increasing their output of oil and gas. My honourable friend, the member for Coventry South, did point out strongly that this bill, contrary to its claims, is not about energy security. My honourable friend, member for Warwick and Leamington, reminded us of the real effects of climate change right now, pointed out that the future is largely electric and this bill is a great deception. The honourable member for Bath called the bill stupid, unnecessary and dangerous. Didn't mince her words very much. Honourable friend, the member for Nottingham East, laid, I think, many of the myths of this bill to rest and indeed questioned why the government is pushing this bill in the first place. And the honourable member for Brighton Pavilion pointed out the political theatre that is behind this bill and why it is completely incompatible with our climate change commitments. Because this really is a reprehensible bill. It's a bill that's based on a number of myths and lies, frankly, and that requires people to believe that there are people around really saying that oil and gas is going to be stopped immediately and won't continue to play a substantial role, as it will, in the energy economy up to 2050. No one is saying that oil and gas will not continue over a period of time, and no one is saying that existing fields in the UK that we have at the moment will not continue to produce and contribute their products in the future. And there will be jobs in that continuing North Sea oil operation. But it's a one-clause bill with effectively two sections in it. And the first section, ostentatiously requires the Oil and Gas Authority to do what it is already doing. And indeed, the Honourable Member for Angus and indeed the member for Brighton Pavilion reminded us that the Oil and Gas Authority has been carrying out regular licensing rounds every 18 months since 2016, and of course they are required to do that because they are under the requirement of maximum economic extraction. All that's already in legislation, and the Oil and Gas Authority is already doing that. And the second section, setting out an entirely bogus climate test, which by definition cannot be failed. And that's achieved by skewing the test conditions to test UK gas production emissions only against aggregate LNG imports, which are overall likely to be dirtier in production than UK gas, and not against pipeline delivered gas, which in the case of our main importer Norway is half as dirty in production as is in the UK. And there is no emissions test for oil, despite it constituting 70% of North Sea fossil reserves, 80% of which we've heard is shipped and refined overseas. But for oil, there is a net importer test, which requires the OGA to issue licences if the demand for oil and gas products in the UK is greater than production, when this has been the case in the North Sea for 20 years and no prospect of reversal. A bill built on completely bogus premises.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. He's talking about bogus premises. He just suggested that we could get more pipeline gas from Norway. Does he not recognise that if we do not produce as much gas as we can from here, it will not be gas from Norway that we can access. It will inevitably come in the form of LNG with higher emissions. So will he please, for the benefit of the House, step up and be honest? We do not have the option to have massively more gas from Norway. If we did, we'd have done it already.
Well, I think I'm going to get injury time for that. If the Minister had been listening to what I was saying, what I was stating is that the bill, in a very bogus way, has deliberately sidestepped the issue that we have gas, which is much cleaner than ours in its production, available for import, which we should be using as a test, whereas the only test that was carried out was LNG, and which conveniently is a little bit more dirty than the gas that we produce in this country. But the bill is not about what it says as much as what it does. And as indeed the former Energy Minister and the author of the Government Net Zero report, the former Honourable Member for Kingswood, said recently, the bill goes against everything the UK is saying internationally about moving away from oil and gas, and has already damaged our international stance by appearing to double down on precisely the thing we are saying the opposite to on the world stage. And as the Honourable Member for Reading West, in a courageous and precise speech, I thought, this evening, the former President of the Glasgow COP said, indeed, it puts into legislation something that already happens under the agency, as I've mentioned, of the OGA, and he stated its sole purpose is to double down on more oil and gas, and nations across the world will not take this very kindly as far as our commitments are concerned. Indeed, the OGA itself emphasised that the bill, it said, is not necessary, but would significantly challenge one of the tenets for the OGA to decide when to run a licensing round, whatever the position in the North Sea objectively. The OGA will be forced to scrape up at least a licence a year forever. We know that the claim that this would somehow do something for energy security is also bogus. As the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead recently said, new oil and gas licences only provide for energy security if all that energy is sold into the UK, and actually it will be sold on the world market, a point a number of honourable members have made this afternoon. This whole thing appears to have come about as a result of a wheeze cooked up by a couple of strategy advisors over a heavy lunch to put the opposition on the wrong foot, or another way of putting it, the right side of history, but which, quite honestly, should have been put down as soon as the effects of the heavy lunch wore off. But instead, the wheeze has persisted through the corridors of power and has finally made it to the floor of the House in the shape of this completely risible bill, the contents of which have evaporated on the first examination by anybody as to its serious purpose. Now, that says rather more about the state of government than anything else. Where were the quality controls on policy making? How has something as evidently content-free and fact-averse as this piece of legislation ever made it so far? And how did present departmental government ministers, whom I have a great deal of respect for, allow it to happen on their watch, when they must know it as a load of hokum with no policy merit at all, but which they are now forced to go out and try and justify to this House today? It's a very sad reflection, frankly, on what a tiny, bitter and sad space the government have retreated into, where serious policy development in the energy sphere, and God knows we've got enough of that to be working on, gets replaced by such ill-advised emptiness. And that is what this bill is in the end, just empty. If passed, it will linger on the statute book for a short period. It will make no difference to anything in the meantime, and will be rapidly overtaken by the reality of the forward march of decarbonisation in energy. But it will have one lasting effect, as I've mentioned, and that is that it signals strongly, and I'm afraid potentially lastingly, that the UK is not serious about its climate and net zero ambitions, and is prepared to say duplicitous things on an international and a national stage. And that's bad news for all the genuine work that has so far been done by the UK in net zero and climate leadership. This bill won't stick, but that charge might. And for that reason, if for no other than the many reasons that have been put forward today, it is best that we take this bill no further than second reading and refuse as a House to let it pass to further stages today.
Thank you, Madam.